All right, boys, it's game day. Let's go. Let's go. Big game. Got a big game today. My package has arrived. Oh, sweet. Nice. Score! Great win, fellas. What game's next? G-Men are having a great year. Let's go blue! Here we go. Prime time football. Texans, Dolphins. Let's do this. Yes! Review. Yes! Yes!
Heartland Flags. Every sport, every team, every flag.
Every team?
That's right.
Fine. I'll get a Washington flag too.
Find your flag and so much more with fast, free shipping. Heartlandflags.com. Every sport, every team, every flag. Almost.
Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome into the Channel Seed Studios for episode 17 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. I'm a sports columnist who covers the Hawkeyes. With you on this Monday morning edition of our show, 2 days after the Hawkeyes suffer a 26-0 defeat to Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, and 1 day after earning a Citrus Bowl bid against Tennessee on January 1st in Orlando, Florida. Lots to unpack today with my teammate here on the show, award-winning writer Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Scott, we do have an ambitious agenda today. We will hit offense, we will hit defense, we will hit the transfer portal and other stuff. But first off, what was your overarching feeling walking out of Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday night?
A lack of surprise, frankly. I mean, 26-0 was probably what, if you would have told me that's what the score would be, I would have totally believed it. And that's pretty much what it was. Iowa's defense played one of its best games I've ever seen, not even just this year, but in general, to the way that they shut down one of the best offenses in the country, the number one team in the country, held them to 213 yards, the least since 2016, and 3.3 yards per carry, the least since 2016, the same game, obviously, Iowa, Michigan. And then the offense was completely inept once again. And this was a combination, and we'll get into this in detail, but combination of lack of execution, game planning, and play calling. So it all went hand in hand and right down and drowned itself in the river. So I think this is overall a gutty, gritty, tough effort, but one that showed how close Iowa is to competing and how far it away is from winning championships.
Good analysis there. I mean, I kind of walked away thinking this game really should have been closer the way the defense played. I mean, this should have been something like, and I'm not saying Iowa would have won, but if not for just a completely inept offense, something like 16-7 or 16-6. It felt like that, more like that kind of game. Obviously, the 87-yard punt return was a major impact in this game. And, I've written about it. I'm actually writing about it again as I'm finishing up DVR Monday now. But, if Cooper DeJean plays, and I know these are ifs and buts, candy and nuts type of things, but if he plays, that never happens. That punt return, there's no question about that. And this game is different. I'm not going to say the outcome changes, but I don't think it becomes 26-0. So I just kind of walked out of there feeling like, yeah, if you just had any offense at all, you'd be at least competitive. But you don't. So that's where we're at. I want to remind folks that Legends and Listeners is brought to you by Heartland Flags and Gifts, which offers free shipping anywhere in the U.S., always has fresh products, nearly every team, every sport, every flag. Visit our good friends online at heartlandflags.com or in store at 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. All this, Scott, leads to the Citrus Bowl berth, and it's not like that was no surprise, of course, but I wanted to kind of tie that together, if we could, with the future playoff and this year's playoff rankings. I know it's a lot, but I think it'll make sense as we go here. Iowa plays a very unappealing brand of football. I think you would say, if you look at them on paper against other 10-2 teams, a general audience might say, let's give the 10-2 nod to that SEC team over there, for a 12-team playoff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's something Iowa has to address at some point, right? They have to become more appealing. This is an entertainment industry. Brian Ferentz told me that in our podcast many years ago. He's come to grips with the fact college football is entertainment. This style of play, and I'm not saying that's what cost Florida State, but it kind of did, because they didn't have the flashy quarterback, right? They did everything else they needed to do against Louisville. They did everything they were asked to do during the regular season, right? So they got left out. SEC goes in with one loss. I don't know. I think you know where I'm going with this, but just next year when it's a 12-team playoff, if it's Iowa versus some other team and you don't have something that's exciting, we saw yesterday that you're going to get left out.
Let's take this in a realistic hypothetical for Iowa football right now, and that is, let's say the players that got injured didn't get injured. The foursome, the main four. Let's say Cooper DeJean's touchdown counts against Minnesota, and it was 11-1 going against 12-0 to win the Big Ten championship. And with those four players, they pull off a shocker. They pull off the win. And I think when you look back at the 16 game and then this game, the defensive effort was comparable. The offenses, and that was not a good offense at any stretch. I mean, I think they threw for 55 yards that day. But when you had a good quarterback and you had a very good running back and you marry the two, and probably a much better play calling that day, then you could pull out a 14-13 win. And Iowa certainly was capable of that with even a mediocre offense the other day. Had that happened, they would have been left out. They would have beaten Michigan 14-13, and then the chaos would have been there, and Florida State would have been in, and Michigan would have been out, and so would Iowa. And that's where we would have been left out. Because when you are talking about, this is the one sport primarily where people's opinions matter the most, because it is a selection committee. When people pick polls, they choose, and they choose based on their biases. And right now, you could agree or disagree about it, but the bias is towards offense and a visual appeal. Iowa is considered a crappy football team by a lot of people, not because of their record, but because of the way they play offense. And you have to address that, because this isn't the NFL where everything's lined up and you can walk right in and, okay, you're 12-5 and you're getting into the number 2 seed. You get voted on if you're the 1 seed or the 4 seed, or if you're going to the playoff. And Iowa has to address that, because if you get left out, if they would have gotten left out under that scenario I painted, it would have been devastating. You win the Big Ten championship and you'd be 12-1 and you don't get to go to the playoff in a 14 playoff. That would be devastating. And a lot of that is visual appeal, Chad.
And yeah, I like how you said that about the NFL, because you're right. That's where Kirk Ferentz comes from. It's black and white, bottom line results. Yeah. And certainly the players all buy into that, et cetera. But the reality is that it does have to change at some point. You cannot rely on this style anymore to get the benefit of the doubt. Maybe someday it'll shift, but I'm just looking at the Florida State Louisville box score. They won 16-6 with a third-string quarterback the other night in the ACC championship game, a week after going into the swamp and beating Florida with a backup quarterback. And also it was an Iowa-style win. I think if anyone who watched that game, their passing stats, 8 for 21, 55 yards. Iowa's passing stats against Michigan in 2016, 8 for 19, 66 yards. They ran the ball well that day. Florida State ran the ball well the other day. But what did we hear? We heard, well, their quarterback's out. So they're not in the playoff. And maybe that's an excuse, but I think that's probably the main reason they got left out is they didn't value the other 21 players on the field, the way they played defense, all that stuff. They beat LSU by more than Alabama did. I'm not making a case. I can make a case for Alabama too. And I would if I had to. But it came down to style of play. And so I'm not saying Iowa's ever going to change its style of play, but this has to be a wake-up call. If not for Kirk Ferentz, then for whoever the next coach is.
Mm-hmm. And I think it comes down to not only style of play, but I think it's passing system. It's passing play. When you look at Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, primarily those three, they run, I would say, pro-style offenses, physical offenses. They run the football. They don't have like running quarterbacks per se. They try to play that way, and Iowa tries to play that way too. But their passing systems, and they have athletes, but are diverse enough that you can exploit defenses in multiple ways. And Iowa hasn't done that for a long, long time. It's just kind of done what it's done for 15 years, and it really needs to evolve. And and we can discuss this at length. Which is you look at the schematics of the other day, Chad, and the game planning. I don't think that they didn't work hard at it. I just don't think that they work smart at it at times. And I looked at the groupings going into the other night. They only had 2 plays all year out of a 0-2 formation, which is 2 tight ends, 3 wide receivers. The other night, I believe it was 9 or 10. I miscounted on something earlier, so I got to go back through the video. But it's either 9 or 10 the other day. And when you look at it, why do you do that? Now, if you have Eric All and Luke Lachey, or even one of those two and Addison Ostrenga, I'm all in. But when you don't, why are you putting a true freshman out there in that position? Why are you putting anybody else besides Addison Ostrenga in that position? You're basically saying our second tight end in a 5-receiver set, all wide, in shotgun, is better than our 3rd or 4th wide receiver. I don't get that. I think that's a disservice to the scheme, because then they're covering that guy with a defensive back, and they've never proven that they can run those routes. So, that part was incredibly frustrating, and especially the rewatch, which was there were the sequential order of some of the formations to go along with the plays called at the certain times was really, really bad, Chad. I hate to say it, but this was going to be a tough game. They weren't going to win it no matter what, but they were not helped out by the scheme or the play calling.
Well, this on my show outline, this was a kind of our meaty topic we were going to attack, and why don't you kind of brought the segue into it. So I think just for the purposes of continuing this convo, let's go into that now, and then we'll kind of circle back to maybe our second topic as we go. I think that's good to have that flexibility, because that's top of mind for me too, Scott, because you mentioned I guess you call it 0-2 formation. Do you call it 2 or 0-2? What do you say?
I call it 0-2 just to make sure.
Yeah. I got my notes right here. You can kind of see 0-2. I don't know if you can see that or not, but the first 5 times, Scott, that Iowa had third and medium to long, they went 0-2. So it was clear that Brian Ferentz came into this game with that strategy, and they had a bunch set, I believe, in all 5 of those. This was all in the first half. They had a bunch set in all 5 of those with 1 tight end, 1 receiver on one side, and then receiver tight end on the other side. So, and Zach Ortworth was that guy, and all 5 of them failed. I didn't ever understand when I rewatched these, what were they even trying to do? So, for example, the very first series of the whole game, it's 3rd and 5. Actually, my favorite play call of the game was the second one. by Brian, which was the jet sweep to Caleb Brown. I thought that they should have just done more of that all game long.
Mhm.
You know, the first play was a bootleg for no yards to Addison Ostrenga, and that was like, you know, that's kind of a bread and butter play.
Yeah.
Michigan showed right there it wasn't going to work. Fine. Second down, fine with that too. You got 5 yards on that jet sweep. But then 3rd and 5, it's a 4-man rush. There's a little pressure from the left, but nobody's really an outlet receiver. They're all running, you know, slow curl patterns at the sticks. Nothing creative at all. There's no meshing. There's no anything. It's just 5 guys running the same route. And, you know, Deacon Hill's not smart enough to figure out which guy to throw to. Deontay Vines was probably most open there, but he throws to Ortworth, who drops the pass,
Mhm.
and who's tightly covered because he can't
Yeah.
get open because he's a true freshman tight end against a defensive back. So
Right.
it just didn't make sense. And then there's a bunch of others. I mean, they all failed. And then the one that really kind of drove me nuts was 3rd and 5, late in the first half. I guess he's been setting this up all game, supposedly. He's got the 3 bunch guys to the right, and then Ostrenga and Caleb Brown to the left. 3rd and 5 from your own, I think it was 14-yard line.
14. Yeah.
Yeah. And they try to throw the wide receiver screen to Caleb Brown. And Brown, maybe this is what he was taught. Maybe he didn't do it right, but he basically takes one step back and kind of stands there waiting for the screen. And if it had gotten there, it would have been completely blown up. That had no chance. I don't understand what the concept is there. Like, Michigan's got athletes to close on that stuff. It's not like it's not fooling anybody, and you're not blocking anybody. So you're basically you're counting on that screenplay to get thrown against, I guess, soft coverage or something. But that, you know, Michigan closes quickly. The ball gets batted down. It doesn't matter anyway. But why not have Brown running toward the quarterback like they used to do with Ken O'Keefe, those tunnel screens, you know, where you're kind of running into instead of just standing there waiting for the ball. It was just like, it almost felt like he was trying to set that play up the whole game. And then when they threw it, it was just a total disaster. So it's just really, really abject failure from the offensive coordinator and this offense.
Yeah. The execution part we knew was going to be very difficult. I mean, athlete for athlete, it is a no comparison. It's MAC school at best offense against one of the best defenses in the country. There are 3 levels of difference between, you know, Iowa is not Ohio State or even Penn State or Indiana for that matter, going up against Michigan. It just doesn't have anything that it can do. And when you try to pull a screen like that in a real pivotal part of the game, but it's also on your own 14, that is a very dangerous call. And your Caleb Brown is not going to be able to out-juke all those other guys. He's just, you know, this team just took out Marvin Harrison and Mika Obuka, you know, so they've got, you know, it's like, come on, guys, you know. But you know, they ran at times effectively, but, you know, they weren't overly committed to it because the problem is that their best plays have been more interior counters. And then you look at, you know, Michigan, their strength is their defensive tackles. So it mitigated anything that Iowa really wanted to do. Iowa tried an outside zone at one point, and that was completely destroyed because their perimeter and their the way they chase backs is elite, and Iowa didn't have anybody who could set the edge. And but you know, I think Zach Ortworth's going to be a great player. I mean, the fact that he's a true freshman and he's making these kind of impacts is important. But in that situation, the true freshman trying to have separation on these routes, I think that they're so complicated and convoluted for what Iowa has that it needs to come back to ground zero. And what are you going to do next? And I mean, there are certain things that they should do that they won't do. They refuse to do, which is running quarterback. Running quarterback is one way to differentiate this offense and make it change a little bit, and that they're just not committed to doing that. So what then? I think Iowa has been a disappointing program when it comes to screen game forever. I don't understand how you can be a zone blocking team up until the last year or so and not be able to throw and have movement players along the line of scrimmage and not be able to throw running back screen passes on a regular, consistent basis, because they work. They work tremendously well if you can do it. And Iowa's never done it. I don't even know why they don't try or what. And then the receiver screens, yeah, the tunnel screen, you're good for that for about once a year when Ken O'Keefe was here, even as a quarterback's coach. They don't even teach it. And remember, one play, I'm not going to give too many plaudits to Greg Davis because I wasn't a real fan of his either, but one play that they used to do was the one-step throw to like the slot receiver running kind of towards the sideline. And a lot of times that gained 6, 7, 8, 9 yards. I always remember CJ Beathard throwing it to Matt Vandenberg. What happened to that? Where's that? I mean, it's just, it's basic, and it's weird because it's like this vortex of being so overly basic and easy to predict with being so difficult to manufacture in the pass game that nobody can run it effectively and everybody can stop it.
Well, let's continue the conversation. I mean, because I do want to mention Circus Sports as the exclusive sports betting app of Iowa Everywhere. Circus Sports is sports betting the way it should be, with the highest limits, lowest holds, and best odds. Download the app today at the App Store or circusports.com. Iowa is currently an 8-point underdog against Tennessee, which underscores with that defense, underscores a lack of confidence in the offense. So let's kind of move the conversation forward a little bit here, Scott, because it's a different era. Like, transfer portal opened today, and Iowa has to move on an offensive coordinator, and you're not going to get anyone to come here without something going on at OC. The folks at the NIL Collective need to know what's going on. They don't know what's going on at offensive coordinator. Kirk Ferentz, obviously Brian Ferentz staying through the bowl game, but you're also risking losing some offensive players, maybe a running back, maybe a receiver, certainly probably your third string quarterback. So what do you think? I mean, is Kirk Ferentz really going to just not do anything until January 2nd, 3rd, 4th? Or do you think he gets the wheels in motion now?
I know he's heard from candidates, and I know that people have sent stuff to him and told him things, and he's talked about certain people. But as far as, this is a real mystery, because this is so un-Ferentz-like, because he obviously has to hire the replacement for his own son in a time and a place that he never would have wanted to do to begin with. And that he has, the clock is ticking and ticking very loudly. And then you throw on the fact that he had a championship game to prepare for, that, it really, it expedites everything. I mean, I know he's, I think, out in Vegas early this week because Robert Gallery's going in the Hall of Fame. The portal's cooking right now. How active would they be? I don't really know. I don't know that they would be overly active. Maybe they would look at players. I'm sure that's, they're not going to look for the players like they did last year necessarily, where it has to be a first-day quarterback. But I do think he needs to encourage the players he has and those who are considering staying, who want to stay, if it's advantageous for them from a style of play, and who's going to be calling the plays and who's going to be designing the plays and how that's going to go. And if it's going to be a continuation with John Budmeyer, or is it going to be Paul Christ, or is it going to be somebody that maybe we don't even know, because he's looking around and he is getting a lot of recommendations, and I'm sure he's sifting through those. But ultimately, it's a critical one for the last couple of holes of his career. He's got, otherwise, they get this wrong, they're going to go down kind of Hayden Fryville the last couple of years of his tenure, or last 6-7 years of his tenure, which he had a little bit of a rise, but other than that, it was really flatlining. So Chad, what do you think? I mean, do you think this is going to be something where by the end of tomorrow that he's going to have a beat on somebody, or is this going to be, well, we're just going to take it, day by day, and I'll talk, and hopefully Iowa's bureaucracy allows him to move expeditiously fast.
What I have to go on is the history here with Kirk Ferentz, which is, he's taking every game, one game at a time. Obviously, the championship game delayed everything a little bit more, but we've seen Penn State already name an OC. Things are moving out there, and these guys are going to want to have answers. I do know that the coaches are meeting with the players today, with the Broyles ceremony tomorrow, Ferentz, like you said, in Vegas tomorrow. So today's kind of the day where players are going to have come into his office with questions, and I would love to know what his answers are. Hey, I know what I'm going to do. Here's what we're going to do, or we're going to get through the bowl game first, and then we'll start sifting through it, because the portal's open from now till January 2nd, right? So that's when players can enter the portal. In other words, so. If you don't have any answers for them by January 2nd, the day after the bowl game, they can still enter then. So it's a risky spot, and it kind of circles back for me to where we started this conversation, which is if you don't move quick, the window, literally portal window, is going to close on you, and you need to be 10-2 next year if you want to get in the playoff. Yeah. Like, it's now that it's 12 teams, it's not going to be, oh, yay, we're going to the Music City Bowl at 8-4. That's just not going to be good enough. The bar's been raised. You've got a schedule where you can go 10-2 next year, where you can go 10-2 and have quality opponents. So if you're just going into this like a regular offseason, I think that's a poor strategy. I'm not saying he's doing that, but it concerns me that, Brian Ferentz is the coordinator through this game. I don't know what that does for you really either. I realize that's the plan, but why keep him as coordinator for this game? I mean, I realize that's how they do things, but it was so bad in Indy. You might as well just go out on that one. That was a turd.
Yeah, for sure. Well, he's employed through the bowl game. If somebody hires him tomorrow, he could leave too, like most coaches in this world do. A bowl game is a bowl game. Now bowl games, other than playoff bowls, are glorified exhibitions. There's just really not going to be anything that's going to energize the base. They don't even matter as much as they did 5 years ago. I mean, they're a game, they're important, but you've got to be cognizant that there's more out there. What about the other positions? I can't imagine that every single staffer would probably stay. And a lot of that's going to be, after bowl games when you have the convention, and there's going to be some movement there. But I think OC is different. OC is different than let's say Kelton Copeland becomes offensive coordinator at New Mexico State. Just throwing it out there. Then you got to replace a wide receivers coach. That's something you can do 6 weeks down the road or 2 months down the road if you need to. But when you're talking about an OC and the portal opening, you've got to be diligent, and you've got to put that out there right now. So then people on your own roster go, okay, I'm excited. Something different. We're going to change. We're going to get better. And then other people might go, oh, okay, I can kind of see that, because there are the positions that Iowa needs to look at. And, Chad, on offense, some of it to me is going to depend on if one or both tight ends come back. If one of them comes back and you have Addison Ostrenga, I feel like you could probably not have to worry about the portal at that position. What do you do at offensive line? It's still, at times it's been good, but it's also been inconsistent. And how much of that is injury related? How much of that is talent related? How much of that is coaching related? I don't know. But they've got to assess that. And then wide receiver, really had one. And it was a guy who didn't play until the last couple of games of the year. So, do you think the younger guys can grow, or are they just guys? So Those are the questions I have immediately. And of course, at running back, you would be naive to think that all three would return.
Good breakdown there. Yeah. And that's why these player meetings today are so important. I think Kirk Ferentz will at least get an idea where these guys are leaning. And he kind of talked about it yesterday during the Citrus Bowl press conference that, now is the time when they're going to at least try to get a feel for that. And he will encourage guys that maybe aren't all in to explore elsewhere. So, and then you, of course, got sixth-year decisions, mostly on the defensive side of the ball, that could be really impactful. My mind's kind of racing on this stuff. I would say you need a tackle, and that's no offense to anybody currently playing tackle, but I think Jennings Dunker will be a tackle for the team next year. Hopefully Mason Richmond gets healthy and all that, but if they could get a Caden Proctor type, hate to say that, but somebody over there, maybe you can move Mason inside and really bolster the interior line next year. You could have Richmond, Jones, Colby on the interior of that line. I know they count on development, all that stuff, but you need to be better at tackle, just in general. And you got to have more depth at tackle too. Clearly did not come to fruition this year with Dejon Parker, et cetera. So that's a priority for me. And I feel like that's a position you can recruit to Iowa regardless of coordinator. So maybe that's something. And receiver, because you lose Regaini. Does Deontay Vines, does Seth Anderson jump in the portal? Maybe one does. I mean, you're going to have to find someone there too. And that's probably going to come down to Cade McNamara a little bit too. Like, can he recruit somebody to come here? I think that's something to consider. It's I don't know. I'm not trying to say that Brian Ferentz shouldn't call plays in Orlando. I mean, he's clearly, I don't know. I wouldn't say clearly, but he's definitely on his way out, and what he's going to be having to work on resumes and all that. He's got to be making calls this month, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, for the good of the team, would there be an argument to say, hey, John Budmeyer, you're coordinating the offense this month. Brian will help out. He'll do everything he needs, but you're coordinating the offense this month. You're calling the plays. I don't know if you can, I guess, as an analyst, but maybe, I don't know. There's probably some logistical stuff there. I'm just saying, what about something like that? Just because you're not going to get probably Brian's full attention this month anyway, and maybe you don't even want it.
Well, there's what you and I would think and do, and then there's, he's Brian Ferentz, and he's the son of Kirk Ferentz, and he's going to call the plays unless he has another job. And now you can pretty much let him do his thing all the way up until game prep week, and then he has to be invested. So for the next 2 to 3 weeks through Christmas or so, he can worry about other things. He doesn't have to worry about recruiting. He's not going to be here. Maybe he helps out, but he's not going to help out his own job search. I can't imagine, for his position. I don't know why he would. But I think that's fair. I would then, even if the next OC comes in, you want to get him on campus as soon as possible to work with people. I mean, at least discuss life with them. Another X factor to me is Cade McNamara. He was never healthy this year, and he's coming off an ACL, so which means he's not going to be able to practice in the spring. What do you do at quarterback? Do you just go in status quo? Maybe the new OC has some ideas. Maybe they don't involve Cade McNamara. Maybe they involve somebody else. I think they put a lot in that, almost all the chips in the Cade McNamara pot. And for what? I mean, even in the beginning of the year, I'm waiting. I remember going to the Penn State game going, this is his time. This is why he came to Iowa. And it was a horrific game. Not all his fault at all. And then he got hurt. He tore his ACL. So then you're looking at training camp before he gets back in the flow. Now he'll be able to do 7-on-7, I'm sure. But still, that's a lot. And you're putting it on him. And is he that good? Can he win you a championship? Let's be fair here. Michigan had a machine 2 years ago. He was part of it. That's it. So a lot of things to question at this point in the big picture. Narrowly, once they wrap it all up and go forward, we'll cover it the way it is. But at this point, I think you gotta really focus on every single aspect and ask, is this the best for the program and the team? Because otherwise, you're doing a disservice to the whole program, which is what they've done, frankly, the last 3 years to the defense. They've done a disservice to the defense, maybe even 4 years, based on what the offense hasn't been able to do.
Great point. Want to give a shout out to our show sponsor, Steeple Ridge Bourbon. During this holiday season, Steeple Ridge Bourbon can guarantee you a high quality, delicious drinking bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. You mentioned the defense, Scott. Let's flip to that side of the ball here. Just a gem of a performance by Phil Parker. And I realize, they were playing from behind all game. I totally get the fact that Michigan, didn't have to force the issue once it got out in front too much. But I thought you mentioned it. I thought, this is one of Phil Parker's better games as a defensive coordinator. The adjustment to the 4-1-6 in passing situations was outstanding. You put Cohen Entringer out there in place of Nick Jackson. And Brian Allen got a few snaps, I think 7 maybe, something like that. And was able to – he was just part of the plans. They were different. And it kind of – that's what drove me nuts about the offensive plan was there was just nothing new. There was no creativity. It was just blah. I don't remember any deep shots. But on defense, you saw a coach that went into a big game, made adjustments, and they worked. 213 yards for Michigan, 3 for 15 on third down for a 50% third down team. I think both of us wanted to talk a little bit about the job that Phil Parker, Seth Wallace, Kelvin Bell, Jay Neiman did on Saturday night.
No question. I mean, and you're talking about not having their most prominent player, at a quarterback, and yet, it did affect them, especially early. Deshaun Lee they took advantage of Deshaun Lee. But the defensive line played as good as it's played all year for sure. And not having, the players, not having that supreme pass rusher yet. I mean, this is a team that allowed 14 sacks all year, and they had 4 and 3 in the first half, and they were coming and they were fighting. I mean, this team couldn't hardly run the ball in Iowa. They were breaking up passes. If it wasn't for incredibly short fields, one by, accident and one by, official ruling, one, punt return and official ruling, and then another fumble. I mean, those 3 big plays led to 17 points. Maybe they only lose 9-0 or something, now, not to totally break news on here, but Terrio Thompson just entered the portal. So that goes to next year. But overall, to see the way Deontay Craig played, Y.A. Black, Jay Higgins, and Sebastian Castro may have been the best player on the game, either team. I was just overly impressed how they coached, how they fought, and how they brought it. They had a championship effort. It just won't be realized. But I think most people watching that game understood how good they were and what kind of position they were put in. And they damn near pulled off one of the great performances I've ever seen.
Yeah, and you think about that, all that stuff's outstanding, Scott. And you think about next year, it's going to be a really good defense again. And that's why we're kind of emphasizing the importance of this OC conversation because let's say, I don't know. We don't know, but let's say Higgins or Castro comes back, maybe both. You've got I think we all saw Cohen Entringer becoming a guy the other night, despite a block in the back or whatever, just with the hustle he showed on that punt return, the trust they had in him in 4-1-6. Could he and Wampa be the safeties? Could you have? You're probably going to need a corner to emerge. Maybe it is Deshaun Lee. Maybe that's fine. But if Jamari stays, also that's another decision. This defense could be really good. You're going to have Herkett back, Craig back, Graves back. You think Y.A. Black back, right? He's got another year. I don't think he's probably going to go pro. Be surprised. You got the bones for another elite defense again, and so that was even more encouraging that what they did the other night, because you could see. Think about Herkett, Nebraska this game, some other games too, but man, he was good. He's good. Like Joe Evans will be missed a lot, but Ethan Herkett's going to be just fine. And Deontay Craig just wasn't quite healthy this year. I think he's going to be better next year. And then you got Brian Allen again. There's another example. Hey, a little cup of coffee. You earned your way to the field in week 13. Now let's see how that materializes next year. And I feel like they've recruited well at that position too. So I feel really good about the defense next year. That's not a big shock, but I think it speaks again to Phil Parker and why he certainly is up for the Broyles Award tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, you replaced 7 starters, and last year he led the country at 3.99 yards per play, and this year after playing Michigan, you are second with 3.99 yards per play allowed, and you're losing first-round draft picks. Yesterday Jack Campbell had 9 tackles. Lucas Van Ness had a sack in prime time, and you have Riley Moss that's playing for the Broncos, and you have all these players who were there, and then the kind of the glue pieces like a John Wagner, Noah Shannon, Seth Benson, they're all gone. And Kayvon Merriweather played 50-plus snaps yesterday for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, and yet you're able to replace those players and play at a very, very high level with the developmental prospects. Other than Wampa, they're all 3-star types. And it shows just what Phil Parker is able to do, the system he puts in, and the way players are able to perform. Jamari Harris has been really good this year. He was off for a year, missed the first 2 games with a suspension, and yet, he's played at a pretty high level. Of course, Cooper DeJean is otherworldly and sorely missed. But, each player is going to have to come up with their own decision as to what they want to stay. I think it's going to determine how good Iowa can be, because if Jay Higgins comes back, that's massive. I think Castro would be wise to lean towards it, because I think he can boost his profile a little bit more. Jamari Harris absolutely should come back. If at best he's a late round pick, and probably one of those guys that's on the edge of a roster. He comes back and puts together the type of year that he's capable of. He could be a first-team All-Big Ten cornerback, go to the combine, maybe be a top 100 guy, but he hasn't really played a whole lot in his career. And then, Y.A. Black is kind of the same way, where I think he would probably be looked at and like 5th round guy, but he could elevate himself and be kind of that Jaleel Johnson type, by the end of his career. So and then Phil, nobody's better, period.
Yeah. Well put. You'll have to have a new punter next year, of course, but we'll get to that later. We got a whole off season here, Scott, but just in our final minutes, let's talk a little bit about the Citrus Bowl. What do you make of kind of this matchup against Tennessee? We all thought it would be Ole Miss, but they move up into the New Year's Six, so that created a spot for a different SEC team. So Iowa will not face a New Year's Six team. Will not face LSU, who was at the Citrus Bowl last year. So they get Tennessee, a rematch of the Hawk Slayer Bowl. Definitely a contrast in styles in this one. I think it's important. The result, Iowa's an 8-point underdog, as I mentioned, but you got a chance to get an 11th win here, and you've got a defense that can do it. Sebastian Castro said after the game he does not expect any opt-outs. I believe him. I don't know who would opt out, to be honest, knowing the guys like we do. If you have a name or thought, feel free, but I can't think of anybody who would opt out based on circumstances. So thoughts on the Citrus Bowl?
Well, if you're talking about opt-outs, they're probably the guys who are already hurt. No, a Cooper DeJean or a Luke Lachey, if they were capable of going to the draft, they might be those guys, but they're already injured, and who knows, Luke may still want to get on the field one more time and before making a final decision or what have you. But this is a contrast in styles all the way. I mean, you're talking about a team that averages, I think it's like 6.6 yards per play on offense. It's high voltage, very quick paced, high tempo. That's how they like to play. Joe Milton is a really athletic, skilled quarterback. Will he be there for the game? I think that's, Iowa may not have opt-outs, but Tennessee might. I think that's going to be pivotal here. And then you look, Iowa, what they're able to do on defense to slow that down. But will it matter? Because will Iowa's offense be able to take advantage of it? They've got a really good pass rusher. Will he play? So Tennessee is a talented team. They're always talented. They're kind of like, they're like, Illinois and Michigan State to me are always teams that are very talented, but yet never really live up to expectation. Tennessee kind of fits that, except they're usually more talented. Will they have a backup quarterback playing instead of Joe Milton? I don't know, but you can expect when it's SEC Big Ten, you can expect a real, difficult matchup, and also one that's highly anticipated, especially in the Citrus Bowl, which is kind of the second prize in a beauty contest of bowls.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna at Hawk Central we'll have a podcast later this week, I think, on a little bit more on Tennessee, because Dargan, is a Tennessee fan, so he knows them very well. He told me that they've got like a 5-star like freshman or something that all the fans want to see. So, How about would you throw a 5-star freshman out for his first game against Phil Parker? I don't know. We saw Kentucky try to play a freshman last year; did not go well.
Yeah, that would be really, it would be interesting to see if Josh Heupel has that kind of thoughts that he would do that. We talk about like degrees of separation. Here's kind of a funny little degree of separation for this game. As we know, Chuck Long was the quarterback at Iowa for 4 years starting. Kirk Ferentz was the offensive line coach. Hired Chuck as his quarterback's coach for his first year after his final year with Hayden Fry. Then he left and went to Oklahoma, where his quarterback was Josh Heupel. And Josh Heupel led the Sooners to the national championship in 2000. So under Chuck Long as quarterback's coach. So, not very many degrees of separation there. So I'll be anxious to hear a little bit more from Chuck about that. But I don't know that I would want to throw a 5-star freshman. I think that could be a very difficult assignment. But this is what bowls have to do, though. I think when you start outside of the playoffs, you have to, teams are going to have opt-outs. Playoffs, they might not, but the regular bowls, they're going to have opt-outs. So you can kind of advertise them as take a look at your future, because it doesn't even count. I mean, every red shirt now doesn't matter. Now, granted, Iowa has blown 2 red shirts, Zach Ortworth and John Nestor, but now it's a matter of, anybody can play. And if you're a 5-star freshman that people want to see and Joe Milton decides to step away, fire away. And if he has a decent game, he's for real. If not, well, just shake it off. You just played one of the tougher defenses you'll face until you face Georgia or Alabama next.
Ferentz yesterday basically doubling down on Deacon Hill as their starter. But, again, what about Marco Lainez in this game? I mean, I don't think Iowa will do it, but the scenario is such where, again, if you didn't have Iowa's mentality, I think you would do it, which is to win every game with the best guy possible, even if it's incrementally better. So I don't know. I'd play Lainez in this game in some way, shape, or form. Get him some experience.
Yeah, I would too, but you know how they are with stuff. I distinctly remember with a 4 and 8 year when James Vandenberg was a senior, he took every snap at quarterback. No Jake Rudock, who's a redshirt freshman, who's the backup. They're 4 and 8. Last 2 games, they have no chance of going to a bowl game yet. There they are. He's out there, and so it's and with Jake Rudock and then Nate Stanley and all these guys have always and even this year, in that Rutgers game, could you given Marco the last series 22-0, just hand the ball off? I don't know. I would have liked to have seen him, say like 6 games ago, but he's going to play if they're blown out or getting blown out. Maybe he'll play. That's really about the only way he'll get out there.
All right, good show, man. Glad we could do this for you guys on a Monday. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for your company in Indianapolis. Didn't get to see any points, but at least we got to hang out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And, got to have a quick trip back from Indy and here we are, Cyhawk week as well.
That's right. Yeah. Women on Wednesday, the men on Thursday. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Thanks for tuning in to Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios, and we will talk to you next week here on the Iowa Everywhere Network.